Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the Mining Podcast. And today's guest is Paul Cronin, who's the MD and CEO of Adriatic Metals, a listed precious and base metals explorer and developer that owns the world-class Vares silver project in Bosnia and have another zinc deposit in Serbia. Paul's background is in corporate finance, investment banking, funds management, and commodities trading. And he is the co-founder of Adriatic Metals. And he's going to talk to us about their journey in developing this world-class polymetallic underground mine in Eastern Europe and what it's going to bring to the region. So that's welcome, Paul, to the podcast. How you doing, Paul?
Yeah, good, Rob. Thanks for having me.
No, appreciate your time as well. I know you're very busy. So for our audience that may not know you, just wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about your career, your background, and then we can talk about Adriatic Metals.
Sure. So I've been working in Europe probably most of my career, actually, starting with Philip Morris in Switzerland back in 1998, and working in the city as a commodity trader and originator, fund manager and investment banker. I've always sort of taken a keen interest in European resource projects because there's not very many, but you can have a look at them and you can see a trend that Europe was starting to sort of come to a realization that it was going to have to start producing raw materials either from within Europe or nearshore opportunities, and I think that really is why I started Adriatic Metals. I discussed it with my business partner. We were presented an opportunity to look at some assets in the Balkans. This one here in Bosnia came up. We acquired it in 2017, and we've been working on it ever since. It has progressed very quickly from effectively acquisition to discovery through to production next year. So it's been an exhausting 5 years, and I've been living out in Bosnia now for nearly 2 years. COVID didn't leave me a lot of choice. If I was going to be able to keep the project moving forward during those lockdown periods, I had to be here to do it. And so, no regrets. I've loved my time here in Bosnia. It's a beautiful place. You can see from the image behind me, that's a photo from our office in the fall. But I think, Bosnia has a lot of great attributes. But nothing's easy in a European context. You've got to do things very differently from what you do in the rest of the world. Yeah.
Before we talk about Adriatic Metals, what's it like living in Bosnia? As you mentioned, you've been out there for a few years living. What's it like living out there, especially if you're an expat and moving to that country?
Look, it's good. I think firstly, the people here are so friendly and so accommodating. No one gives you any trouble. Very welcoming of foreigners and very welcoming of tourists. Obviously, Bosnia is not the most developed economy in Europe, so there are certain frustrations that you've got to work through. Trying to get your residency permit, have your bank account address changed. These things tend to take longer than they actually should. But overall, it's a very vibrant place. It's got great culture, great history, wonderful people, beautiful scenery. If you love skiing, if you love mountain biking, hiking, this is the place to be if you can't afford to live in Switzerland, and I can't. But also, it's very close to the coastline. It's only, I was down on the Adriatic coast this weekend with the kids. 3.5 hours drive, and you're on the most beautiful coastline in the world.
So I just wonder if you can just give us an overview of Adriatic Metals. Obviously, you said that you started the company 5 years ago. So just wonder if you can walk us through that journey to sort of present day.
Yeah, so we acquired a Bosnian company called Eastern Mining. We acquired that from a Bosnian Australian lawyer who picked it up a number of years earlier, but had been unable to gain any interest in investing in it. It came with two assets. One was an old open pit that had been in production in the 1980s, prior to the breakdown of the former Yugoslavia. That was okay. We kind of liked the look of that. There was an instant resource there if you wanted it. Go and put in a few confirmation holes and you're away. But what we were really interested in was in a deposit that they'd started exploring in the late 1980s called Rapica. Now, Rapica, as the crow flies, was about 12 kilometres away from Vares, the old open pit. There wasn't a lot of data about it. There was a lot of geologic interpretation. And if you work with enough geologists over time, you realise there's multiple geologic interpretations of everything. We wanted to understand it more. We did some inquiries. We ended up spending quite a bit of time in the Geologic Institute in Sarajevo, looking at what had been done. We trawled through other archives in former Yugoslav capitals, so Belgrade and Ljubljana. And we just started to piece together a puzzle. And as we're doing the due diligence, we started to realise that they're probably onto something here. And if you look through most old Yugoslavian projects, that they did a lot of detailed geochemistry, geophysics, mostly IP more than anything more expensive or sophisticated. But when they drilled, they only really drilled shallow. They didn't really drill deep. And what we'd seen in one of the holes, which was a vertical hole, was that it ended in mineralisation. And according to the log, which was a paper log, it ended in about 20% zinc. And that was starting to be a bit fascinating. And we'd seen other holes that had a little bit of gold in there, but mostly it wasn't a save for gold and silver, or indeed copper. So we thought, this is worth a punt. We bought it. We drilled it we certainly drilled out the old open pit at Vares straight away. We were drilling that. We closed the deal in March. We were drilling in April. We then drilled up at Rapica in August that year. And our first hole up there hit about 64 metres at about 35% zinc equivalent. And so that really got us sort of quite excited about what we potentially had there. It was a private company at this point. It was all being funded largely by a small number of people, including myself. And we drilled another 7 holes. Of those 7, 6 hit thick, high-grade mineralisation. But it was expensive exploration up there. I mean, you having to do a lot of earthworks to get a drill pad because of the topography. Land access fees were expensive. So we made the decision that we'd take the company public, and we basically did all of the work for that. And we listed the company on the ASX in May 2018.
And I was going to go on to my other question, because obviously you're not just listed on the ASX, you're also listed on the LSE as well. What's the reason behind the multi-listing?
Well, I think for a British company, to list on the ASX is probably a little bit unusual. However, the ASX investor base has a much greater exploration risk appetite. And whilst we were pretty sure about what we had there with those 7 drill holes, we still, had a lot of work to do. We needed to raise a reasonable amount of money. We decided that was the best place to list initially and register our shares as CHESS depository instruments on the Australian Stock Exchange. The ASX is also a lot cheaper to list than AIM, because the exchange is more, geared up to early stage companies. However, by the end of 2018 and into sort of early 2019, with the exploration success that we had, it was very clear to me that Adriatic was going to be a producing company. Rapica was going to be a producing asset. The grades, the size, just ticked all the boxes. So even though we put out our maiden resource in 2019, we knew at that point we had sufficient tons to make a project work. We didn't stop drilling, we kept drilling. But at that point, when you're starting to think, well, okay, we're a British company, we're going to have to raise some capital to put this together. The ASX, is a good exchange. You can raise decent dollars down there. But we are in a European jurisdiction. We're a British company. It made sense to go to the LSE, and we made that decision in mid-2019 and listed on the LSE under the standard list in December 2019. And so since then, if we look at the way the two exchanges have behaved, we're still getting more liquidity on the ASX. And I think that will continue for quite some time. But what we are seeing is a major shift in our registry, particularly since our last project development capital raise, toward UK funds. And what we're now starting to see is UK generalist funds accumulating stock ahead of an expected dividend in a couple of years' time.
Oh yeah, no, that certainly makes sense. So just wondering if you can give us an overview of mining in Bosnia. I suppose a lot of our audience who are all obviously around the world may not necessarily know Bosnia as a mining jurisdiction, although I know they have had a coal mining industry. So just wondering, just give us a brief overview of the mining industry in Bosnia.
Oh, look, I mean, Emperor Constantine was mining in Bosnia back 2,000 years ago. The industry has seen mining throughout the Roman era, the Ottoman era, the Austro-Hungarian era. Since the Yugoslav era commenced, back in the late 1940s, there hasn't really been a lot of metal mining. It's really been focused on coal. There is one other hard rock lead zinc mine operating near Srebrenica. That mine's been in operation for decades. The coal mining industry is quite large here. There's a number of operating coal mines. Electricity is one of Bosnia's biggest exports. And so it does have a mining industry. It does have mining code, excuse me, that was all based on the old Yugoslav era. But they haven't put into production a new hard rock mine, since Vares was developed in the 1970s. So that's been some challenging. We've got to do a lot of people development. We've had to do a lot of engagement with communities and with government to help people understand exactly what it is we're doing. And I think that's something we've done, pretty well.
The operation is in construction at the moment, and I understand obviously all personnel are residential on site. What made you come to that decision and maybe not consider any fly-in, fly-out positions for maybe some of the expats?
Well, we do have two positions that are fly-in, fly-out. They are temporary ones on the construction team. But you're right, all of our other staff are residential. Firstly, of our 150 odd staff here, we only have 13 non-Bosnians. Everybody else is local. We brought those in from the construction industry, from the mining industry, from consultancy firms, etc. But the decision to get the majority of our leaders and our expat staff here in Bosnia was about transfer of knowledge in both directions, quite frankly. It was about them understanding the regulations, which are a little out of date. Okay, they don't correlate well to what we're used to in jurisdictions like Australia and Canada. So there was that in terms of the transfer of knowledge. There was the transfer of language knowledge as well. Our natural English-speaking staff must learn Bosnian, and our Bosnian staff must learn English. So we try to improve that relationship and get that team working cohesively. But it was also about, we told the market we're going to do something. And we're going to do it. We said we would have this construction completed in Q2 next year, and we will do that. But there's no way you're going to be able to do that. In the same way, there's no way we could have got it through all the permitting and all the DFS and everything if I was sitting in Cheltenham. You need people here to have the urgency to do that job. And there's a much stronger buy-in from your staff when they're residential, when they're just living and breathing what they're doing. There's much better interaction with the local community. It also, having residential staff means that our local town enjoys the benefits of their spending money there. Kids go to school, shopping, eating out, coffees, etc. All of these things help maintain our social license. We spend a lot of time and a lot of money developing that social license, and we don't want to lose it. And so if you look at our total staff now, about 2/3 of them actually live in the local town. And I think that's great. This is a town that was at its peak about 23,000 people. It's now about 8. And most people have left through lack of opportunity. It is an old mining town, and certainly the mayor and a lot of the members of the municipal council have aspirations of it becoming a very prosperous mining town again. And I think we can say with quite a high degree of confidence that is going to happen. And it's pretty exciting to be part of it, actually. I'm enjoying it here.
Yeah. What challenges do you see in developing the local workforce within, I suppose, in Bosnia? And do you have any sort of relationships with some of the local colleges and universities for sort of more skilled staff?
So we made a decision to recruit graduates or postgraduates and train them up and teach them new skills. It hasn't been hard to do that. These guys are very bright. They work hard. They're really interested in learning. But we do recognise that, there is a big difference, particularly on the front end of our operation, where, hard rock polymetallic mining with grade variability and mineralogical variability is very different to coal mining, which is much more uniform. So we have had to develop those skills, and we've done that through very extensive investments in human resources, in terms of both its function, its process, but also in training, whether that's virtual reality, simulator-based, classroom-based, on-the-job training, personal development plans, etc. So that has been a challenge for us. I think it'll continue to be a challenge where, we're trying to instill a set of values that some of these kids wouldn't have seen before. They're, probably observing their parents throughout their working careers may not have observed before. And so we're really starting at grassroots to try and build not just a workforce for Adriatic Metals here, but I think what is almost certainly going to be the rebirth of the exploration and mining industry in Bosnia.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. How are your relationships with the local communities? Obviously, you've mentioned certain things, but also obviously the local government in sort of building this new mine in a country that probably hasn't built a mine in decades.
Yeah, look, I think our relationship's very good. At the local community especially, there is almost a symbiotic relationship now between the community and the company. We constantly advise them what we're doing. They constantly give us feedback. The majority of that's really positive. Occasionally it's negative, and we deal with those concerns very seriously. But I think generally, if you went down and walked down the street of Vares and asked someone what they thought of the company, they'd speak of it very positively. We do get involved in a number of community initiatives. We have our rubbish pickup day with the local scouts groups. We go off and just pick up rubbish out of the rivers and whatever for tourists that have driven past and chuck their drink bottle out. We also do a lot of tree planting around the place. Again, with other groups that are interested in seeing the environmental reclamation of some of the historical industrial activity here resolved. We set up the Adriatic Foundation, which is a charity that invests in education. At the moment, we offer scholarships to kids in Vares and Kalkin who struggle on just getting to school. And if they do get to school, perhaps not having a hot meal, etc. So that's been well received. And we've also just started English lessons in the town to anyone who wants them. We thought we'd probably get about 30 people sign up to that. We got nearly 300, which is great. And it's those people that are now utilising the microfinance relationships that we've created with a number of Bosnian institutions to provide financing to set up new businesses that will supply us. And I think, I keep saying it's about sustainability. It's about sustainability. We're focusing on the environmental sustainability through very disciplined assessment of our environmental impact and management of it. We're focusing on our community issues. We're focusing on our economic contribution, both through almost voluntary taxation that you pay into the foundation that invests in a number of these key areas that the town needs. But the biggest sustainable output from this project is actually the way we're developing those young people who would have ordinarily finished school, gone off to Sarajevo or Belgrade or somewhere for university and never come back. And I meet dozens of them here all the time, particularly in the summer holidays when they come back to see their parents. And they're like, gee, I wish, there was an opportunity like this 5 years ago or 10 years ago. What we're now finding is that they're leaving their well-paid jobs in Munich and Vienna, in London, in Perth, and they're saying, do you know what, mate, we'd like to come back. And it means we've probably got to pay a little bit more in terms of wages to get them back. But what we're doing is we're taking that diaspora and all the skills that they've developed in their time abroad, and we're bringing it back into Bosnia. And that is going to have a profound impact, not just in the mining industry, but across many industries in this country, where I think there is huge potential for growth if it has access to capital and the people who know what they're doing. And, that's part of the reasons why I think Bosnia's got such a bright future in Europe. It's rich in natural resources, and it's already demonstrating its ability to exploit it in a really safe and positive way, and make a contribution, whether it's to exportation of electricity to Croatia and Montenegro, or its exportation of coal into Serbia. This country has the ability to become a manufacturing hub through its low energy costs. And I think that puts it in a really strong position with an abundance of natural resources to be almost that nearshoring opportunity that the EU is actively stating that they're looking for. So we are well liked in the way we put that together at a local level. At a federal level, look, I don't think we were even on the radar until probably a year ago. But I've had a number of meetings with several federal politicians, including the Prime Minister, who comes to our company events and speaks, who speak very favourably about the company, the way it does things, the values that it demonstrates. We are a British public company. We're a member of the Quoted Companies Alliance. We have very strong governance processes, and they respect that. They respect that, and that's the type of investor that the Bosnian government wants to see here. And so we do get held up. We win a number of awards, and Investment of the Year last year. Obviously, the Prime Minister was quoted in the Financial Times last year speaking very positively about the company and the industry here. So we have done that aspect really, really well. And I think it's something that we can replicate in other jurisdictions across Europe. Certainly, we're doing the same thing in Serbia with our zinc-lead deposit there. And as we look to acquire more projects in the future, we'll take that same formula of, sustainable approach, working toward the aspirations of our communities, and apply it so that we can, get a social license to operate different projects in Europe, because I do think there is a fundamental need for Europe to develop its own supply chain. It just cannot solely rely on Canada, the US, and Australia, because Africa is becoming more difficult, and certainly Russia, as a key source of European metals, is now almost entirely cut off.
With obviously the economic and political challenges you're probably facing with the current world events, how's this affected your business and Adriatic Metals, and how do you see it playing out over the course of the next year or so?
Well, we've certainly seen inflation. There's no doubt about that. I think generally across the board of our items that we're procuring internationally, we're seeing about 10% inflation, and that's all locked in, so it is about 10% inflation. But the one that's hurt us the most has been diesel. We're doing a large construction project that has a huge civils element. We're building a 25-kilometre road that requires diesel, and lots of it. And we've been able to minimise the amount of movement of material to reduce our diesel consumption. But at the end of the day, if you look at the reasons why we're going to come in, slightly above budget, it's because of the diesel. So that's been difficult to manage. There's very little I can do to control it. I mean, I can pre-purchase diesel in certain quantities, but I can't. I can't pre-purchase every single litre of diesel I'm going to need for the entire development. But I think generally, electricity prices haven't really changed here in Bosnia. I think they will next year, but they haven't changed so far. So that's been a real positive for us. There's the benefits of having a government-owned, vertically integrated energy company, from coal production, hydroelectricity production, through to retail, is they work on a cost-plus basis. And I think a lot of our local suppliers are still working on a cost-plus basis as well, which is why we haven't had a huge amount of exposure to inflation that you may have seen in projects that are being developed in South America or Africa, for example. So we're kind of lucky in that regard. The politics of Bosnia, it's a politically complex place. I'll be the first to admit it. You can try and understand it at your peril. I think for most foreigners, you don't have a hope in understanding all the political machinations of this country and this region. All you've got to take comfort on is that people here just want to get on with their lives, and develop prosperity, and that is happening. The politicians will eventually get out of the way of that. But I enjoy my time here. I love the fact that, on a Saturday morning, if I want to, I can throw on the, grab the ski suit, and in 20 minutes I can be on the slopes. It's a great place to be. I don't get worried about the politics of the place, and the politics change depending on who you talk to at any one time of day.
And as a conclusion, just wondering if you can just give us an outlook of the next sort of 6 to 12 months, and any final thoughts that you may have.
Yeah, look, the next 6 months are going to be very busy. Tomorrow, we are laying the footings on our plant. So that all commenced. So we've been busy working on the underground mine, and we're making very good progress on the declines. We're down now over 120 metres on a 370 metre advance. So we'll hit the ore body at the current rate probably around the end of October. The work up there is progressing very quickly, possibly even a little bit too quickly. We might need to slow it down a little bit to sort of make sure that everything is aligned in terms of haul road construction and plant construction. So it's going to be a busy 6 months as we continue to deliver that. By the end of February, I expect to have an almost entirely constructed plant ready for commissioning. My mine will have been producing ore and stockpiling at its surface. My haul road will be largely complete. And I'll be bringing in a commissioning team to commission the plant and commence production in Q2. So a lot will happen in the next 6 months. I think my expectations for the team here and for the company is that the next 6 months will basically define us. It will define who we are. It'll define that we are a company that delivers what it says it's going to deliver, largely on budget and on time. But what we will have developed along that journey is a group of people here that are capable of delivering this year over and over again. And I think that gives us a great platform, not only for organic growth within our current exploration programs here in Bosnia, which is progressing extremely well, but also within inorganic growth, where we are actively looking at acquisitions. We recently hired someone to look at our strategic growth and look at a number of opportunities, and we'll be looking to execute on those next year as well. So I think you'll see Adriatic Metals go from being what it was in 2017, was a newly incorporated company with ambitions of acquiring a project in Europe, to potentially a multi-site mid-tier player by the end of 2025.
Yeah, I've got one more question. If any of our audience are investors, what would you say to them, and why should they invest in Adriatic?
Look, I think I speak to our investors a lot. We're kind of in that dead zone of the Lassonde curve at the moment. There's not a lot happening, and I know that it's getting boring. I mean, I wake up every morning and have a look at the share price and see it hasn't moved. But I am very happy with the progress we're making on the site. I think we were wise in the way we both structured and the timing and quantum of our project financing gave us sufficient resources to see this through. So what I would say to them is be patient. The ore is coming, and once that comes, you'd expect the share price increase to come with it. We are seeing obviously volatility in commodity markets at the moment. Silver's down a bit. Zinc is I mean, it's ready for a bit of a rocket, I think. We are seeing that arbitrage between China and Europe close. As whilst you might see some, the TCs increase, the zinc price is increasing well ahead of that, and I think zinc will end up being our biggest contributing metal in 2023 and 2024.
Paul, really appreciate your time. It's a great story. You starting the company and seeing your journey to where you are today. Wish you well for the future. Perhaps you can come on the podcast next year and give us an update. Be more than welcome you to come on.
I'd love to, Rob. Thanks very much.
Yeah. For those, and I was going to ask if anyone wants to find out more information around Adriatic Metals, how can they go about doing that? Do you use social media at all? Does Adriatic use social media at all?
Yeah, we're on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. We have a website, and you're welcome to call our investor relations team in London, who will be able to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, I'll include all of those in the show notes to accompany this anyway. So again, really appreciate your time, Paul. For those that are listening, what a great story Adriatic have gone through, and I'm sure they're going to succeed in building a world-class asset in Bosnia. So do watch out for their journey. Appreciate you guys for listening. Hope you can share this episode amongst others around the world. Keep sharing. I really appreciate your continued support. And until next time, happy mining.